Hello po! If you are learning Tagalog, then you are in the right place. My name is Pat and I'm here to welcome you to the Tagalog Time video series and podcast where I will teach you conversational Tagalog. In my Tagalog lessons, we will break down grammar rules, we will learn common phrases that native speakers say, and we will practice so that you can feel confident speaking Tagalog to anyone you meet. Along the way, we will also talk about Filipino culture, history, and geography so that you can have some context to go along with the information we learn about the language. But first, I want to ask you, why are you learning Tagalog? Did you grow up in a home where your parents or your grandparents spoke Tagalog but you were never taught how to speak the language? Or maybe you have a special someone in your life who speaks Tagalog and you want to learn the language so that you can get to know their culture better. Or maybe you are fluent in Tagalog and you just want to understand the language a little bit better. Whatever your reason is, I'm so glad you're here. We will start from scratch, get a good foundation on the language, and build our way up. A little bit about myself. I was born in Manila. My family moved to the United States when I was 2 years old. And growing up, my parents only spoke to me in Tagalog. The only time they spoke to me in English was if I was in trouble. They wanted to make sure that I understood that I was in trouble loud and clear, so they said it in English and in Tagalog. But for the most part, my parents only spoke to me in Tagalog. Also, I watched a lot of TFC, the Filipino channel, growing up, and my family went to the Philippines every other year because we still have a lot of family over there. So all of that really helped me stay fluent in Tagalog. And it wasn't until I was already an adult when I really appreciated the fact that I was bilingual in both English and Tagalog. And I hope to help you in your Tagalog learning journey. I will mention that this Tagalog lesson is available on 2 different platforms. You can find the video on my YouTube channel, Tagalog Time Pat, or you can find the audio wherever you find your favorite podcast. I decided to have this Tagalog lesson available in these 2 different platforms because I know some people prefer the video so that they can see the images on there if they are visual learners, while others are auditory learners and prefer to just listen to the information. However you are catching this episode right now, I do encourage you to try out the other platform at a later time. For example, if you are watching the video on YouTube, maybe try out the podcast later. And vice versa, if you are listening to the podcast, maybe check out the video later. There are certain things in both the video and the podcast that are very beneficial. For example, when you are watching the video, you can see all of the words spelled out. You can see how everything is written and the pattern of all of these phrases. Whereas when you are listening to the podcast, you can really focus on the sounds and the emphasis and the pronunciation of words. The video and the podcast work different parts of your brain, so give each a try and see which one works best for you. Alrighty, let's go ahead and get started with the lesson. This is episode 1. I like to call it Tagalog Fundamentals. Our learning agenda for the lesson includes talking about the history of Tagalog. Where does the name come from? Who speaks Tagalog, like in what regions of the Philippines? And what is the difference between Tagalog and Filipino? So Filipino is actually the national language of the Philippines. How is it different from Tagalog? We'll talk about that. Then we will learn some common introduction phrases so that you can have a conversation with someone you just met. And lastly, we'll do some practice questions and apply what we learned. Alrighty, this is a picture of a river. In fact, this is the Marikina River in Metro Manila. I will just describe it to you. In the back, there are some skyscrapers, really tall buildings. In fact, this is kind of what you would see in the Philippines whenever you visit a big city. So there's skyscrapers. Most of those are probably condos, probably office buildings for both domestic or local businesses as well as international businesses too. And then there's probably some shopping centers all mixed in there as well. Around those skyscrapers, you will see a lot of houses. So big cities are very populated. A lot of traffic can be seen there. However, throughout the city, you will find pockets of nature, like this river, or even parts of wooded areas, or even nature parks where families will often relax together. So what does a river have to do with Tagalog? Well, in Tagalog, the word river is ilog. And back in the day, those who lived near the river were called Taga-ilog. Taga means from, ilog means river, so these people were from the river, or also known as river dwellers. The opposite of that would be Taga-bundok, from the mountain. So this was just a way to distinguish people in different regions. Taga-ilog are those who were living beside the river. And the name Tagalog comes from this phrase, Taga-ilog. It is the language that was spoken by these people who were living near the river. So eventually, the language was called Tagalog. Now, what is the difference between Tagalog and Filipino? Well, before the 1930s, there actually wasn't even a national language in the Philippines. At the time, Spanish and English were considered to be official languages, but there was no national language assigned yet. It wasn't until 1937 when Tagalog was declared to be the national language by the government. However, this was pretty controversial. Tagalog was only spoken in the Central Luzon area. That means people up north and people in the south did not speak Tagalog. There are lots of languages and dialects throughout the country. In fact, some people didn't even recognize Tagalog as the national language. Some people did not support this decision, but ultimately Tagalog was chosen for a number of reasons. First, Tagalog was spoken in Manila and its surrounding areas. And this is where the government had resided for many years. So since this is the area where government decisions were being made about politics, economics, and social issues, many people decided that Tagalog would be more suitable to be the national language. Also, Tagalog was chosen because it didn't have as many smaller dialects like other languages did in the country at the time. Another reason why Tagalog was chosen to be the national language was because there was an extensive amount of historical documents and books written in Tagalog. So this showed that Tagalog had already been a well-established language. Lastly, Tagalog was chosen to be the national language at the time because even though not a lot of regions spoke it fluently, it was the most widely understood language throughout various regions in the Philippines. Eventually, in 1987, it was declared that Filipino would actually be the national language instead of Tagalog. So what is the difference between Tagalog and Filipino? Well, Filipino comes from Tagalog. However, it includes loan words that are also commonly used, but come from Spanish, English, and other languages. For example, let's take the word dictionary. In Filipino, people would just say diccionario, dictionary. However, a true Tagalog purist would say talatinigan. You'll notice that the word diccionario has a lot of Spanish influence. And that is what the Filipino language is all about. It incorporates all of these loan words that have been mixed into Tagalog. So that's the main difference between Tagalog and Filipino. Tagalog is the uninfluenced language, whereas Filipino incorporates all of these loan words and influences from other countries. So speaking of, what are some of the Tagalog influences? Well, Spain colonized the Philippines from 1521 to 1898. So for over 300 years, Spain occupied the country, so it had a big effect on the Filipino culture, language, and traditions. Here are some loan words from Spanish. Caballo, horse; radyo, radio; cuchara, spoon; tinidor, fork. Another country that influenced Tagalog is China. There were a lot of immigrants from the Hokkien community who were from the southern tip of China, and they immigrated to the Philippines between the 16th and 19th centuries. There are a lot of Chinese influences in the Filipino culture. For example, the cuisine, pancit and lumpia, come from the Chinese culture. Also, beliefs in feng shui and other things like that come from Chinese culture as well. Here are some Tagalog words that were influenced by China. Hikaw, earring; susi, key; ate and kuya, so older sister and older brother. Those are some words from the Chinese culture. Next, America influenced Tagalog. America occupied the Philippines between 1898 and 1946. And here are some English words that have influenced Tagalog. Wais, wise; ballpen, pen; nurse, nurse; driver, driver. Also, Japan influenced Tagalog. They occupy the Philippines between 1942 and 1945, and here are some Tagalog words that were influenced by Japanese. Karaoke, katol, which is the incense or some smoke that's used to deter mosquitoes, and then tsunami. And again, this is what the Filipino language incorporates. It adds all of these words that have been borrowed from other countries into Tagalog, whereas Tagalog purists would use other words that were more used in pre-colonial times. All right, so now let's take a look at where Tagalog is spoken throughout the Philippines. There are three main island groups in the Philippines: Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Luzon is up in the north, then Visayas is in the central area, and then Mindanao is way down in the south. Tagalog is spoken here in this central Luzon area, so it's more up there in the north. There are so many languages in the Philippines, and here are just some of them. Ilocano is spoken up there in the north, northern Luzon area. Tagalog again is the central Luzon area. Bicolano is in the southern Luzon area. Waray is spoken in the Visayas region, also Cebuano and Bisaya. All of that is spoken in the southern areas of the Philippines. And then Hiligaynon is on the western side of the Visayas region. Now the big question is, what is the difference between language and dialect? I will say that not everyone agrees. Some people think Tagalog is a language. Some people would say Tagalog is just a dialect. Same with Bisaya. Some people would say, oh, Bisaya is a language. Others would say that Bisaya is a dialect. Based on my research, language is considered to be more broad, whereas dialect is more regional. So yes, someone could argue, oh, Bicolano is regional, Hiligaynon is regional. I like to consider all of these as different languages, and I know I'm going to get people who disagree, and I apologize, but I also just like to give these regions their own recognition as having this developed language and form of communication. I've been corrected before. I've called it a dialect and someone said, no, actually it's a language, and vice versa. I've called it a language and people say, no, it's a dialect. I would encourage you to maybe do your research. You figure out what you want to call these different forms of communication and call it what you would like. I will call them languages. All right. Now let's take a look at where Tagalog is spoken all throughout the world. Well, just think about where Filipinos go. Wherever there are Filipinos, there's likely to be someone who speaks Tagalog. And Filipinos travel all around the world, either for their families, they want to be closer to people who have moved away, or maybe just for work. There are a lot of overseas Filipino workers, so Filipinos have moved everywhere, all around the world. So Tagalog is spoken in almost every continent. Did you know that there has been a Filipino on Antarctica who did some research there? Other than that, they can be found in South America, Africa, North America, Australia, Europe, Asia, everywhere, really. So it is a very widespread language. In the United States, especially on the West Coast, like California, Nevada, Washington State, Tagalog is one of the most spoken languages in households, according to the U.S. Census. So good for you for learning Tagalog. It is a very useful language when you're meeting someone new. All right, so let's go ahead and learn some common phrases in Tagalog. If you want to say hello, how are you in Tagalog, it's Kumusta ka? Kumusta ka? So it's spelled K-U-M, kumusta ka. But sometimes you might hear some people say kamusta ka, like it's a K-A sound. Kamusta ka? So if you want to say hello, how are you, it is just one phrase, kamusta ka? All right, now here are some responses. If you're doing well, you can say mabuti naman. Mabuti naman. That means I'm doing good. I'm doing great. I'm doing well. Mabuti means good. Naman is an emphasis word. So I'm doing good. Mabuti naman. If you're just doing okay, you can say ayos lang. Ayos lang. Ayos means okay. Lang means only. So I'm only doing okay. Ayos lang. And if you're not doing good, you can say hindi mabuti. Hindi means not. Mabuti means good. So not good. I'm not doing well. Hindi mabuti. Okay, say these phrases with me one more time. Kamusta ka? Hello, how are you? Kamusta ka? Kamusta ka? Mabuti naman. I'm doing well. Mabuti naman. Mabuti naman. Ayos lang. I'm doing okay. Ayos lang. Ayos lang. Hindi mabuti. I'm not doing well. Hindi mabuti. Hindi mabuti. Next, if you want to ask someone's name, you could say, ano ang pangalan mo? Ano means what? Ang means is. Pangalan is name. Mo is referring to you. Ano ang pangalan mo? To reply, you could just say, ako si blank. I am blank. For example, I would say, ako si Pat. Ako si Pat. I will say, the long and formal answer could be, ang pangalan ko ay Pat. That literally means, my name is Pat. Pat is my name. However, this isn't conversational Tagalog. A lot of people would just say, ako si blank. Ako si Pat. All right, let's try saying these phrases one more time. Repeat after me. Ano ang pangalan mo? What is your name? Ano ang pangalan mo? Ano ang pangalan mo? Ako si blank. I am blank. Ako si Pat. Ako si blank. All right, if you want to ask someone where they're from, you would say, taga saan ka? Taga means from. Saan means where. Ka is referring to you. Taga saan ka? Where are you from? Taga saan ka? To reply, you would say, taga blank ako. I am from blank. Taga means from. Ako means I am. Taga Manila ako. I am from Manila. Taga blank ako. All right, say these phrases with me one more time. Taga saan ka? Taga saan ka? Taga saan ka? Taga Manila ako. Taga blank ako. Taga blank ako. Next, if you want to ask about someone's age, you would say, ilang taon ka na? Ilang taon ka na? Ilan means how many. Taon means year. Ka is referring to you. Na means already. Ilang taon ka na? Ilang taon ka na? To reply, you would just say, blank ako. I am blank. 30 ako. I am 30. Blank ako. Usually, when someone is saying their age, they use Spanish numbers. So an 18-year-old might say, 18 ako. I am 18. But you could also say it in Tagalog or in English. 30 ako. Let's say these phrases one more time. Ilang taon ka na? Ilang taon ka na? Ilang taon ka na? Blank ako. 30 ako. Blank ako. The long form of your answer could be, ako ay 30 taong gulang. That literally means, I am 30 years old. Again, this is not so much conversational Tagalog. It's more common for someone to just say, 30 ako. Next, you can ask someone, ano ang trabaho mo? What is your job? Ano means what, ang means is, trabaho means job, mo is referring to you. Ano ang trabaho mo? Ano ang trabaho mo? Your response would be, blank ako. So very similar to the last response. I am blank. I am a blank. For example, I could say, nurse ako, teacher ako. And here's just some vocabulary on some professions. Guro, teacher. Nurse, nurse. Doktor, doctor. Abogado, lawyer. So you could say, guro ako, nurse ako. All right, say these phrases with me one more time. Ano ang trabaho mo? Ano ang trabaho mo? Ano ang trabaho mo? Blank ako. Nurse ako. Guro ako. The long form answer would be ako ay isang nurse. Literally, I am a nurse. Ako ay isang nurse. Again, this is not conversational Tagalog. More people would just say, blank ako, nurse ako. Next, someone might ask you, may asawa ka na ba? Are you married? May asawa ka na ba? May means to have. Asawa is a spouse. Ka is referring to you. Na means already. Ba is a question word. May asawa ka na ba? May asawa ka na ba? Your response would be, oo, yes, wala, or hindi, no, wala pa, not yet. So repeat after me, may asawa ka na ba? May asawa ka na ba? And you say your answer, oo, yes, wala, no, wala pa, not yet. Next is a very similar question. May anak ka na ba? May means to have. Anak means child. Ka is referring to you. Na means already. And ba is a question word. May anak ka na ba? Do you have any kids? May anak ka na ba? May anak ka na ba? Your response would be the same as the last question. Oo, yes. Wala or hindi, no. Wala pa, not yet. So the difference between wala and hindi. Wala technically means none or nothing. Hindi means no. And since the question has the word may, which means do you have, it's almost like a quantity, then you could answer with wala, none. I have none yet. I don't have any kids yet. So wala, none. Sometimes you might also hear someone say hindi, no. Most commonly you would hear someone say wala, none. If you do want to answer and say that you do have kids, you can add the number of kids in your response. Oo, may dalawang anak na ako. Let's review some Tagalog numbers. Isa, 1, dalawa, 2, tatlo, 3, apat, 4, 5, 5. Now, if you listen again to the response, it's oo, may dalawang anak na ako. When the number ends with a vowel, like dalawa, ends with the letter A, you have to add an NG at the end when you respond. So, oo, may dalawang anak na ako. So, instead of saying may dalawa anak na ako, you have to add an NG to the end of the word dalawa so that it connects to the word anak. It's almost like you're saying two of child. You have two children. And you add this NG to the end of any number when it ends with a vowel. So, isa, dalawa, tatlo, 5, 5. But for the word apat, 4, it ends with a consonant. You would have to add the word na before the word anak. So, oo, may apat na anak na ako. So anytime the number ends with a consonant, you add the word na. All right. Say that again with me. May anak ka na ba? May anak ka na ba? Do you have any kids? May anak ka na ba? And your response, oo, yes. Wala or hindi, no. Wala pa, not yet. And to talk about how many kids you do have, you could say, oo, may dalawang anak na ako, and just fill in the number in the phrase. Lastly, to get to know someone, you can ask them, ano ang hilig mo? What are your hobbies? Ano means what, ang means are or is, hilig means your likings or things that you like. Mo is referring to you. Ano ang hilig mo? What do you like to do? What are your hobbies? Your response would be, mahilig ako blank. I like to blank. And here are some examples of some hobbies. Mahilig ako magluto, to cook, magluto, magbasa, to read, magbasa, manood ng TV, watch TV, manood ng TV, sumayaw, dance, sumayaw, mag-exercise, to exercise, mag-exercise. Now, this is a great Taglish tip. When you don't know a verb in Tagalog, you can use the mag pattern. So mag-exercise is just the way to say exercise. That's commonly how people would say it. If you wanted to say that you like to swim, but you don't know how to say swim in Tagalog, you could say, mahilig ako mag-swim. I like to swim. Later on, go back and look up what to swim is in Tagalog. Then you can say, mahilig ako lumangoy, lumangoy. So I am a big supporter of using Taglish, especially while you are learning Tagalog. The main focus here is to learn the patterns and formation of phrases. And over time, you will learn more Tagalog vocabulary so that you can fill it into these phrases. But in the meantime, feel free to put English words wherever you need to. All right. Now, I always get asked, how do you use the word po? The word po is a part of speech that is used to show respect. Usually, kids say po throughout a conversation when they are speaking to an elderly person. Or adults even say po when they are trying to be respectful either to someone in authority or someone older than them. There are specific placements for the word po, but I will tell you about those in my next video, how to use po. But just as a rule of thumb, you can always add po to the end of anything you say and it will always work. It will always be respectful. So for any of the phrases that we learned today, add po at the very end when you are speaking to someone older than you. And that's just a good way to show respect. All right, now it's time to practice what we learned today. Translate these phrases in Tagalog. I will give you 10 seconds and then we'll go over the answer. Okay, so the first phrase that we're going to translate to Tagalog is, what is your name? What is your name? How do you say that in Tagalog? Ano ang pangalan mo? Ano ang pangalan mo? What is your name? Ano ang pangalan mo? Now, how would you reply in Tagalog? If someone asked you, ano ang pangalan mo? How would you reply in Tagalog? Ako si blank. Ako si Pat. Ako si blank. All right, next question. How do you say, what is your job in Tagalog? What is your job? Ano ang trabaho mo? Ano ang trabaho mo? What is your job? Ano ang trabaho mo? Now, how would you reply in Tagalog? Blank ako. I am blank. Nurse ako. Teacher ako. Next, how would you say, hello, how are you in Tagalog? How do you say hello, how are you in Tagalog? Kamusta ka? Kamusta ka? Kamusta ka? Now, how would you reply in Tagalog? Remember, there are 3 different responses that you could say. How would you reply to kamusta ka? If you're doing well, you could say mabuti naman. Mabuti naman. If you're doing okay, you could say ayos lang. Ayos lang. And if you're not doing so good, you can say hindi mabuti. Hindi mabuti. All right, now how do you say, are you married in Tagalog? Are you married? May asawa ka na ba? May asawa ka na ba? Are you married? May asawa ka na ba? Now, how would you reply in Tagalog? Remember, there are 3 different types of responses you can give to this question. May asawa ka na ba? You can say, oo, yes, oo, or wala, hindi, no, wala, hindi, or wala pa, not yet, wala pa. How do you say, where are you from in Tagalog? Where are you from? Taga saan ka? Taga saan ka? Where are you from? Taga saan ka? Now, how would you reply in Tagalog? Taga blank ako. Taga Manila ako. I'm from Manila. Taga blank ako. All right, how would you ask, how old are you in Tagalog? How old are you? Ilang taon ka na? Ilang taon ka na? Ilang taon ka na? Now, how would you reply in Tagalog? You can say blank ako. For example, I would say 30 ako. So blank ako. All right, next question. How would you ask, do you have any kids? Do you have any kids in Tagalog? May anak ka na ba? May anak ka na ba? Do you have any kids? May anak ka na ba? And how would you reply in Tagalog? You can say, oo, yes. Wala or hindi, no. Wala pa, not yet. And if you wanted to be specific and say how many kids you do have, it would be may blank anak na ako. May dalawang anak na ako. I have 2 kids. Or may apat na anak na ako. I have 4 kids. So that would be the sentence structure if you wanted to say how many kids you do have. Lastly, how would you ask someone, what are your hobbies in Tagalog? What are your hobbies? Ano ang hilig mo? Ano ang hilig mo? What are your hobbies? Ano ang hilig mo? And how would you reply in Tagalog? Mahilig ako. I like to. Mahilig ako magluto, to cook. Magluto. Magbasa, to read. Magbasa. Manood ng TV, to watch TV. Manood ng TV. Sumayaw, to dance. Sumayaw. Mag-exercise, to exercise. Mag-exercise. And remember, you can always use a Taglish tip. If you don't know a verb in Tagalog, just say it as a mag verb. Mahilig ako mag-swimming. Mahilig ako mag-shopping. And later on, go back and try to figure out what these words are in Tagalog. So to swim is lumangoy. Mahilig ako lumangoy. All right, we learned a lot today. We learned about the history of Tagalog. We learned where it's spoken and some influences of it. Then we learned some common phrases that hopefully you can start using when you meet someone new. And then we practiced. I encourage you to maybe write these phrases down on a note card. Write the English translation on one side and the Tagalog translation on the other side, and then just review them throughout the day. Practice really does make perfect. Try using these phrases to a native speaker that you know, or if you don't have anyone you can speak to right now, really try practicing these note cards on your own. And a lot of people I meet get really nervous about their accent. I always say, ignore the accent. Forget about it for now. The accent will come the more you practice. I will say that even I have an English accent when I'm speaking Tagalog sometimes too. It usually comes out when I'm nervous or if I'm speaking too fast. But really, that doesn't matter. What matters in the end is that you are able to communicate in Tagalog. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more Tagalog lessons and follow me on my other social media platforms. Thank you so much for joining me in this Tagalog lesson. In my next lesson, I will talk about how to use po when you want to be respectful. I hope to see you there. Paalam! Hello po! Welcome to another episode of Tagalog Time. In today's Tagalog lesson, we will learn how to use the word po. If you have ever listened to a Tagalog conversation, specifically between two people who have a significant age gap, maybe a younger person and an older person, then you have likely heard them use the word po. So what is this word? Why is it used when people are speaking Tagalog? And how do you use it? We will go over all of that in today's episode. So today's lesson agenda will be all about the word po. We will go over the who, what, where, when, why, and how of using it. We will talk about the history of it, where it probably came from. We will learn all of the different placements for it, and then we will practice where to put po in certain phrases at the end of the lesson. So first things first, what is po? Po is a part of speech that is used in Tagalog to show respect. I always tell the kids' classes that whenever you are speaking to an adult, you always have to use po. However, adults can also use po whenever they are speaking to someone who's older than them or if they're speaking to authority, and we'll go over that in just a minute. It's important to note that there really is no direct English translation for the word po. The closest things I can think of in English that are similar to the word po are the words ma'am and sir. I live here in North Carolina in the United States, and down here in the South, using ma'am and sir is a very respectful thing to do whenever you're speaking to someone maybe older than you or to anyone you want to show respect to. For example, someone might say, "Thank you, ma'am, thank you, sir," or "Yes, sir, yes, ma'am," whenever they want to show respect. And that's kind of the same idea with the word po. However, ma'am and sir aren't always used throughout the sentence, so it's not quite the same as po, but the idea is the same. So where did the word po come from? Some say that the word originated in pre-colonial times from this word apo. Now don't get confused, it's not the word apo, which means grandchild, but it's the Tagalog word apo, and it means Lord. But in pre-colonial times, and even in indigenous communities today, those who are well respected in the community were referred to as apo. That was kind of their title. That's what they were called. Just to tie it in with some current events, you might know the name Apo Wang Od. She was recently on the cover of Vogue, and she was the oldest woman to be on the cover of the magazine. She is a Filipino woman who comes from an indigenous community called Kalinga, and she is known for her tribal tattoos. She's one of the few people who still do these tattoos in the area, so it really is such a special thing. But again, she is called Apo in the community because she is well respected. And so with the word po, people think that it comes from this word Apo. For example, back in the day, someone might have said, "Oo, Apo, yes, Lord." And then eventually it was so commonly used that it was just shortened to the word po, and it was added throughout the sentence to show respect when someone was speaking. So that's kind of an accepted idea of where the word po came from. So why is po used? Well, the Philippines has a very respectful culture, and that can be seen through many practices. For example, children are taught at a very young age to do the mano po, also known as bless. And that is where the young person takes the hand of an older person and touches the back of the hand to their forehead. It's said that this was a way for them to grant a blessing from the elderly person. And that just emphasizes the idea of how people are taught to really respect their elders. Another way people show respect towards others is through the way they refer to each other. For example, the titles ate and kuya are used for people who are older than you. Ate is what you call an older sister or even an older cousin or friend who's a girl. These are usually someone who's just a little bit older than you, not too much older, otherwise they would be tita and tito. But if they are just like one generation older than you, then they would be considered your ate. Same with the name kuya. These are your older brothers or older cousins and friends who are boys. For example, if I am older than you, you could call me Ate Pat. Your older cousin might be Kuya Sam, and so on. So again, these titles just show how respect is embedded in the family and community unit. As I mentioned, kids are taught to say po whenever they are speaking to their elders. So their parents, their aunts and uncles, their grandparents. However, it's important to note that adults also use the word po whenever they are speaking, of course, to their elders, so maybe their grandparents or their parents, but also to anyone in authority, so bosses or police or priests or doctors. So anyone they want to be respectful to, they would say po. When and where is the word po used? It can be used anytime, whether you are just at home with your family, or if you're at the grocery store, or if you're at work. It's always appropriate whenever you want to show respect. Other than using the word po personally with your family, you might also hear the word po in hospitality settings. So for example, at hotels and restaurants. You will likely hear the staff speaking to you with the word po. And that again is just a way to show respect because you are a guest in that area. And that is just a way for them to be professional and respectful. All right, so how do you use the word po? Before we jump into the proper placements of po, let's go over some common Tagalog phrases that we can use as a reference. So first, the basic way to say hello and how are you in Tagalog is just kamusta ka, kumusta ka. To reply, you can say mabuti naman, I'm doing well. Mabuti naman. Or if you're just doing okay, you can say ayos lang, ayos lang. And if you're not doing well, you can say hindi mabuti, hindi mabuti. Say these phrases with me one more time. Kamusta ka? Hello, how are you? Kamusta ka? Mabuti naman. I'm doing well. Mabuti naman. Ayos lang. I'm doing okay. Ayos lang. Hindi mabuti. I'm not doing well. Hindi mabuti. Next, if you want to ask for someone's name, you can say, ano ang pangalan mo? Ano ang pangalan mo? Your response would be, ako si blank. I am blank. I would say, ako si Pat. Ako si blank. Next, if you want to ask where someone is from, you can say, taga saan ka? Where are you from? Taga saan ka? To reply, you can say, taga blank ako. I am from blank. Taga Manila ako. Taga blank ako. Let's say these phrases one more time. Ano ang pangalan mo? What is your name? Ano ang pangalan mo? Ako si blank. I am blank. Ako si Pat. Ako si blank. Taga saan ka? Where are you from? Taga saan ka? Taga blank ako. I am from blank. Taga Manila ako. Taga blank ako. Next, if you want to ask how old someone is, you can say, ilang taon ka na? How old are you? Ilang taon ka na? To reply, you can say, blank ako. I am blank. 30 ako. Blank ako. Next, if you want to ask about someone's job, you can say, ano ang trabaho mo? Ano ang trabaho mo? To reply, you can say, blank ako. I am a blank. Nurse ako or teacher ako. Let's say these phrases one more time. Ilang taon ka na? How old are you? Ilang taon ka na? Blank ako. I am blank. 30 ako. Blank ako. Ano ang trabaho mo? What is your job? Ano ang trabaho mo? Blank ako. I am a blank. Nurse ako. Blank ako. Alright, so we learned some common phrases. Now let's see where po would go in these phrases. First, the most common placement for po is that it is the second word in the sentence. For example, saan po ang CR? Saan means where, po is a sign of respect, ang means is, CR stands for comfort room. It's what they call the bathroom in the Philippines sometimes. So saan po ang CR means where is the bathroom? So po is the second word in this question. Another example is natutulog po siya. Natutulog means sleeping. Po is a sign of respect. Siya means he or she. It's gender neutral. So we would have to find more of the context clues about this phrase. But this essentially means he or she is sleeping. Natutulog po siya. Again, po is the second word in this phrase. The second rule for the word po is that it goes after the words ko, which means I, or na, which means already. So if either of these words appear in a phrase, po would go after that word, ko or na. For example, nakita ko po yung kotse. Nakita means saw. Ko means I. Po is a sign of respect. Yung means the. Coche means car. So, I saw the car. Nakita ko po yung coche. Po is after the word ko. Another example, kumain na po ako. Kumain means ate. Na means already. Po is a sign of respect. Ako means I. So, I already ate. Kumain na po ako. Po goes after the word na. Lastly, po goes after a set phrase. For example, maraming salamat po. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat po. Also, it can go after the phrase magandang umaga po. Good morning. So these are just some set phrases and po goes after them. I will note that if you don't remember these po placements, you can always add po at the end of anything you say, and it will always work. It will be respectful. It might not be the most common placement for the word po, but it does the job. So if you don't remember that po goes after the word ko or after the word na, just add it to the end of the phrase and you will be respectful. And that's the ultimate goal. All right. Now let's talk about po pronouns. This is very important. Whenever we are using the word po, you have to change the singular you pronoun to the plural you pronoun. For example, the word mo turns into the word nyo. The word ko turns into the word kayo. Depending on the sentence, mo means you or your, and ko means I or my. And these are singular pronouns. So anytime you are using the word po, you have to use the plural you pronoun, nyo and kayo, respectfully. And they do this in other languages as well. They do this in French. I took 5 years of French between high school and college. And anytime you refer to someone in a respectful way, you have to use the plural you pronoun. And you do this even if you are just speaking to one person. So that can get a little confusing. People always ask, so if I'm only speaking to one person, but I'm still using the word po, I still have to refer to them in the plural you? Yes, you do. So anytime you are trying to be respectful and you are using the word po, you have to use the plural you pronoun. And we will see how that works in these examples. So just to review the common phrases we just learned, kamusta ka? Hello, how are you? Mabuti naman, I'm doing well. Ayos lang, I'm doing okay. Hindi mabuti, I'm not doing well. Now, if we want to be respectful, let's see where po would go in these phrases. Kamusta ka turns into kamusta po kayo. So po is the second word in this question. And then ka becomes kayo. So that is an example of where the singular you pronoun becomes a plural you pronoun. So kamusta ka becomes kamusta po kayo. Next, mabuti naman becomes mabuti naman po. So that's just a set phrase. It would go at the end of that. Very similar, ayos lang becomes ayos lang po. Again, it just goes at the end because it's a set phrase. And then lastly, hindi mabuti becomes hindi mabuti po. Again, that's just a set phrase. You might hear someone say, hindi po mabuti. I've heard that before, so it can also be the second word in this phrase, hindi po mabuti. But since it's a set phrase, I would add it to the end, hindi mabuti po. So those are some examples of where po would go. Just some more common phrases. Let's review. Ano ang pangalan mo? What is your name? Ako si Pat. I am Pat. Taga saan ka? Where are you from? Taga Manila ako. I am from Manila. Now let's see where po would go in these phrases. Ano ang pangalan mo becomes ano po ang pangalan nyo? So po is the second word here, goes right after the word ano. And then mo becomes nyo. So again, the singular you pronoun becomes a plural you pronoun. Next, ako si Pat becomes ako po si Pat. Po is the second word in this phrase. Taga saan ka becomes taga saan po kayo. So this po placement does not really fall into any of the three major placements that we learned. But I do want to point out that ka becomes kayo. Again, that is where the singular you pronoun becomes a plural you pronoun. And lastly, to respond, taga Manila ako becomes taga Manila po ako. So in this case, po is the third word, so it doesn't really fall into any of the categories that we learned earlier. But when in doubt, you can always add po to the end. Taga Manila ako po. That will also work. In fact, when I was a kid, that's what I was taught. Just always add po to the end of anything you say. The more you hear people speaking Tagalog, you'll catch on to where po typically goes. You'll hear the flow of the sentence, and you'll learn where po might and might not go. Alrighty. Ilang taon ka na means how old are you? 30 ako. I am 30. Ano ang trabaho mo? What is your job? Nurse ako. I am a nurse. Let's see where po would go in these phrases. Ilang taon ka na becomes ilang taon na po kayo. So po goes after the word na anytime it appears in a phrase. And then ka becomes kayo. So ilang taon na po kayo? How old are you? 30 ako becomes 30 po ako. So po is the second word placement there. Ano ang trabaho mo becomes ano po ang trabaho nyo? Po is the second word placement here. And then mo becomes nyo. And lastly, nurse ako becomes nurse po ako. Po is the second word placement in this phrase. All right, let's try some practice questions. Just to review, these are the three common placements of po. Usually it's the second word placement in a phrase, or it goes after the words ko or na if either of them appear in a phrase. And lastly, it goes after a set phrase. And then the most important rule is anytime you are using po, you have to use a plural you pronoun instead of the singular you pronoun. So like the phrase we learned, taga saan ka? Where are you from? Turns into taga saan po kayo? Ka becomes kayo. You would never ever hear someone say, taga saan po ka? The po and the ka are never together since that is a singular you pronoun. You always have to change the ka into kayo, which is the plural you pronoun. Taga saan po kayo? All right, so let's do some practice. What is the proper placement of po in these phrases? Maligayang bati, happy birthday. Maligayang means happy. Bati means a greeting. So happy greeting, usually used for happy birthday. Maligayang bati. I'll give you a hint. This is a set phrase. So think about that. Maligayang bati, happy birthday. Where would po go there? Next, binili ko yung laruan. Binili means bought. Ko means I. Yung means the. Laruan means toy. So I bought the toy. Binili ko yung laruan. Where would po go in this phrase? Binili ko yung laruan. And lastly, kinain ko na yung pagkain. Kinain means ate. Ko means I. Na means already. Yung means the. Pagkain means food. I already ate the food. Kinain ko na yung pagkain. Where would po go in this phrase? Take a minute and try to think of where you would put po in these phrases. All right. Maligayang bati becomes maligayang bati po. So that is a set phrase, so po would just go at the end of that. Maligayang bati po. Next, binili ko yung laruan. I bought the toy. Becomes, binili ko po yung laruan. Po would go after the word ko in this phrase. Lastly, kinain ko na po yung pagkain. So remember, one of the rules was it goes after the word ko or na if either of them appear in the phrase. What if they both appear in the phrase? It would just go after both of them. So kinain ko na po yung pagkain. Po goes after the word na, which is after the word ko. So did you get it right? I hope you did. It does take some practice, but remember you can always add po to the end of your sentence. All right, so just a quick note. What is the difference between po and ho? For example, someone might say ano po, which means what? Someone else might say ano ho, which also means what? What is the difference between po and ho? Well, both are a sign of respect. They have the same placement rules that we just learned. However, ho is considered to be a little bit more informal and po is formal. Some people might use the word ho when they are speaking to an elderly person who is not really close to them or a stranger who they don't really know well. For instance, some people use the word ho when they are speaking to an older person who they don't really know very well. So maybe an older stranger or just an older acquaintance, they might use the word ho. Whereas po is really saved for older people in their family, people they really know and want to formally respect. I personally don't use the word ho very often. I just use po for everyone when I want to be respectful. However, I have heard people use the word ho whenever they're speaking to someone kind of informally, but also still respectful. You might hear it in movies or Filipino shows or things like that. Just know that it is equivalent to the word po, but just a little bit less formal. Alrighty, so we learned a lot today. We learned the placements of po. We learned